Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Pierce. I am the Learning and Video Ambassador for TechSmith Corporation. Glad that you could be with us today. We're excited to be able to be back on the air. We took a little break for the Thanksgiving holiday. And if you're listening to podcasts, of course, now we're a couple further weeks out, but we're glad you could be here. Today, we've got a really great topic, something that I think, especially since the beginning of this world pandemic and health problems, that people have been going remote. And there's this interesting issue that if you were creating a lot of instructor-led courses, now you got to figure out how to get them into a virtual setting so that you can actually deliver them to your audience. And we've got a great guest today. We've got Shannon Tipton. She's going to be joining us and talking about this, and we're going to dig into that in just a second. So one of the things I just want to mention, if you are listening to the podcast, please go out and give us a rating. It helps us get found and helps your colleagues and friends and others know that the Visual Lounge is something that you can watch and listen to. Now, with that said, let's jump right into today's episodes. We're going to introduce Shannon here. If you've ever met someone that you just click with, let me just tell you, you feel like you've known them for a long time, then you know how I feel about Shannon Tipton. Shannon is someone that is, at a small conference, she took me under her wing, and through that experience, I have benefited greatly, not only learning from her, but getting to meet awesome people that she was so gracious to introduce me to. But she also, I just watch her present and I watch her share her knowledge, and it's an inspiration. So Shannon is the Chief Learning Rebel that's the company's name as well, as Learning Rebels, which you can find more about at learningrebels.com, where she teaches, consults, and helps organizations think differently about workplace learning. And with that said, let me welcome Shannon Tipton to the Visual Lounge. Hey, Shannon.
Hi, thank you so much for that great introduction.
Oh, you are so welcome. We're glad that you're here today to talk with us about this topic that I'm sure a lot of people, if you're making courses, instructional design stuff, I'm guessing they're struggling a little bit with the challenge.
Most likely.
So Shannon, we obviously introduced you, but what would you tell the people that are watching about yourself to help them to get to know you a little bit?
Well, to get to know me a little bit, I do like to think about training differently. I like to put on different lenses and think about the problem from a different approach. And that's typically how I've addressed my work style when I was in corporate America, and also now as I run my own business. And the tagline there's two, because I couldn't decide, fighting the good fight, which is, trainers out there, find your voice, find your passion, right? And then second to that is it's time to think differently. And it is time to think differently about training and how we conduct it, how we approach it, how we deliver it to our businesses, and how we truly add business value.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, right? I don't know, is that my noise or your noise that we're getting coming through? Did anyone else hear that? Okay, well, that's good to know. Well, the stream will let us know if they're hearing the ghost that is haunting my earphones right now. Anyway, one of the things I think I love about this Find Your Voice is I think so many trainers are out there, instructional designers are struggle to do that on a regular basis. They struggle to find their seat at the table, if you will, from that kind of business metaphor.
Yeah.
Real quick, what advice would you give someone to help them find their voice?
Just do it, really. It's interesting. I was just on another webinar not more than an hour ago, and we were talking about mindset shift. And one of the things is that, of course, you've got your growth mindset and your fixed mindset. And where are you? Do you find that you're saying a lot of, I can't, I shouldn't, I won't, they won't let me, so you're finding yourself in this negative space and in this fixed mindset place. And sometimes it's just a little shift. It's rather than I can't, it's a why not, and I shouldn't, I will. I've always been of the mindset of beg forgiveness. If they're going to fire me because I'm using my own branded templates in PowerPoint, then, let them fire me for that. So it's, and then you just work bigger. So my theory here is, jump on in, the water's nice, take a couple of risks, do some under the radar pilots. There are so many things that you can do to shift your paradigm even just a little bit, and shifting it just a little bit makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. And I'm going to, it seems like every time I start to talk, I get some feedback. So I don't know what it is. Somebody did say it's the ghost of Jing. So we're gonna monitor this and hopefully it's okay. I know Shannon was having some technical problems earlier today, so hopefully I'm not now getting the technical problems. I'm gonna do one thing real quick because I want to be able to have another shot here. Just there we go. So now we got you solo, so we can hear you during those times. Anyway, one of the things I want to ask you, we're going to jump into the instructor-led stuff here and to virtual-led stuff in a second. One more question I want to ask you as we get going. I know you use images, you use videos, but how do you use visuals, like, obviously video or images on a daily basis? What's your kind of go-to thing for using images and video?
You mean aside from Snagit?
Well, you don't have to say tools, but yes, thank you. But like, what are you using them for daily? Besides how you're making them, what kind of things do you use them for?
Images are really important to what I do. And a few of my clients, they hire me to create infographics and other visual type of training for them. And so that's really what I'm using images for. And for me, images speak to the point of the infographic. So if I'm creating an infographic, and I was just working with a client, we created 50 infographics for them. And each one was very unique in style. And I was thinking about what's the point of this infographic? What's the goal of this infographic? And then all of the images then had to align with that point. So every graphic had purpose, every graphic had meaning, so when I'm thinking about how I'm using images, that's pretty much how I'm using it. It's how am I going to communicate a message through that graphic? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. You don't hear it, really. This whole podcast is going to be me saying, you don't hear it? And I apologize to everyone that's listening, and because I can hear it, and it's going to drive me crazy. But that's okay. So let's shift from the kind of some of the general stuff to talking more about instructor-led training and virtual-led training. Where I'd like to start, Sharon, is Shannon. Oh my gosh, my day is falling apart.
That's okay. I won't hold it against you. It's all good.
We'll take care of it later when we get to see each other in person again. I'll get you a beverage of your choice.
One of these days.
So with the two topics, so I want to define them a little bit, because if someone's listening or watching this, they might not know the terms, and we'll probably shorthand them ILT, VLT, but what do we really like? What defines those? Is it just like one is in person and one is literally online, or is there things that are different than that?
No, it's just a media application. So it's a media application for your training. And when you think about ILT, typically ILT is live. It's live. I'm here, you're in your seats, in your tables or in your groups. I'm standing right there in front of you. We can communicate with each other. I can read your body language, etc. So ILT. VILT, your virtual space, which is what we're in now. It could be a training program or a classroom or a webinar, but me leading it through some sort of virtual application while the other people are dispersed in other geographic locations, yet we're all coming together to learn one thing.
Makes sense. And that's so now every time I talk, I'm getting some kind of feedback coming through. So I'm going to sort through this.
It's the voices in your head, Matt.
It's the spirit of Christmas past coming to get me. I know we have some confirmation that it is coming through, but when I start talking, it's something I'm getting a little bit of feedback. So I'm going to do some investigation, but we're going to press forward because that's all we can do. And I apologize to everyone listening and to you, Shannon, because it's kind of distracting me that we're not bringing Matt's not bringing his A game today, but we're going to work on it. Okay. So we got these two kind of media presentations, right? Like you got them there. So obviously I think there's probably a lot of people who are very comfortable face-to-face. It's very comfortable. It's very natural. We've been doing, it's a style that's been going on for eons, literally.
Right.
People have been training. So when you look about taking a program that already exists and you're starting to think about like, should it be, I guess is probably where I'd start. Should it be virtual? What kind of questions are you asking to determine if that is even going to start to work? I mean, we can get into the nuances and we'll funnel down into like the, how do you do that, whatever, but how do you know if it's going to be a good, even to translate it, to start to do the work?
Right. And actually, that's a really good question. Just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? And when you're first thinking about, should I move something to the virtual space, the key question that you're asking yourself is, what is it that you're hoping to accomplish from this? So there's a webinar, and then there's a virtual training event. And those two things are very different. So you're taking a look at your curriculum and you're thinking, is this something that people are going to utilize? Is there a change expectation? And to be honest, we all know that we should not be putting out a training program if there is not a change expectation behind it. Okay, so that could be put into the virtual training bucket. Now, if there is something that's just knowledge-based, not unlike what we're doing here, really, is that there's, I'm just giving you information. I'm hoping you're going to use that information. That really becomes a webinar. It's one-to-one type of knowledge versus one-to-many type of training information. And you take a look at your curriculum and think, what's the goal? And can I achieve that goal in a virtual space? 9 times out of 10, yes, you can. As a matter of fact, I was working with somebody in law enforcement, and they were going to move their shooting practice, defensive shooting, into the virtual space. So for those of you who say, well, we can't put our sales training in the virtual world, look, if law enforcement can put their shooting practice into the virtual space, then you can put your sales training into the virtual space. So it's just a matter of taking the learning objectives and reconfiguring them so that they can be put into the virtual space. But you really have to think first, what's your goal?
Yeah. I think if I just keep talking long enough, it's going to go away. So it's like Ghostbusters. I swear. I apologize. I love that analogy though, that story, because I mean, I'm trying to think of, is there anything that doesn't translate though? Obviously, you've just shared an example of something that's very, like, I would expect when it makes sense in a virtual space. But what are the considerations then? Like, because obviously that's a very physical action. Are you asking people to practice at home? Are you asking them to still do like behavioral things? Or is it more like concept, idea, and theory? You're just taking the parts that make sense to talk about.
No, you could do concept, theory, behavior change. You could do application. You can do all those things. The key is, do you have the right tools to do it? So you can't expect to have some sort of success in training if you are simply using WebEx meeting. You cannot have that expectation because you don't have the tools. And so what I mean by the tools are, do you have breakout rooms? Do people have an opportunity to communicate and to share ideas and to reflect on those ideas? Are people able to annotate? Are you able to use a whiteboard? Are you able to share screens? Can your participants share a screen? Is there a collaborative space? So when I say tools, I mean real tools that we would use in the classroom, which can be replicated in the virtual world. And if you don't have access to those tools and you're just, like I said, looking at WebEx meeting, then no, do not try to convert your training, because then what happens is you're just talking, and maybe you're using the chat feature and nothing's going to get accomplished by that. So you have to be sure that you have the right tools in place to hit the objectives that you want to hit.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I'm trying some different things here to see if we can get through the noises. But okay, so we've got these applications of things we can do. So I think one of the questions that's going to come up, and if you have questions and you're watching, again, apologize for the technical issues, but ask the questions. Let Shannon and I know what questions you want to get to. Happy to answer those. One question I think that probably is on some people's mind, though, is this idea of engagement. And you talked a little bit about like breakout rooms, and I think there's some inherent elements and kind of the things that you can do in the tool. But let's take a kind of a sidestep for a second and say, what does it mean in a virtual led environment, we'll call it, I think is probably a good term. What does it mean to be engaging in that environment? Like, does that mean like you gotta be I think a lot of people think engagement's a funny word. It's like, oh, well, I gotta be funny, or I gotta be telling stories, or, like whatever engagement means for someone. But like, what does that look like in a good virtual kind of environment?
Yeah. First, the key is you have to be interesting. You really do. People will not be interested unless you are interesting, or if the topic is not interesting, then people will not be interested. Those things go hand in hand. So once you have that hook, then it's about how do I keep them engaged? And a lot of times what I see happening is people will come into a virtual meeting and maybe they come into silence, so that's off-putting. There's either silence or there's just a little bit of banter or a little bit of chit chat and nothing really happening. So you're setting the tone. What would happen if you went to a party and you opened up the door and you walked into the party and it was absolute silence, no music, no talking, no anything? Well, you'd turn around and you'd walk out and you'd find a different party to go to. Same thing happens here. So think about how you are introducing your topic and how you are gaining attention and how you're hooking interest. That's the first part. The second part then is to remember that when it comes to engagement is not necessarily synonymous with interactivity. So let's talk about engagement first and being engaging. Now, being engaging on the screen is taking it up a notch. So if you are naturally introverted and a naturally quiet type of facilitator, now's the time to practice being a little more up in your energy, because this little screen, remember, ILT means I'm right in front of you. I can see your face. I can see your body language. This virtual space is me on a camera being transmitted to you on a little laptop screen, or maybe on a bigger monitor if somebody is, lucky to have a second monitor. So your little screen has your little face. So now you've got to be more up with your energy. You've got to be willing to smile more, put more inflection in your voice. You have to be more generous with how you are bringing people into the conversation, right? So it's not about being funny or over the top with your energy. Nobody's asking you to do that, but just be aware that your mannerisms and your tone of voice and your facial expressions all need to fit on a little space, and you've got to bring people in. So that's engaging. Now let's talk about interactivity. So interactivity then is, how are we getting people engaged with you and engaged with the information? Now there's a couple of rules of thumb here. And the first off is something should be happening on the screen every minute or two. And when I say something should be happening, there should be a screen transition if you're in PowerPoint. So something should be happening on the PowerPoint screen. Or you should be annotating the screen using the annotation marker, either in WebEx or Zoom or whatever application that you're using. Or that maybe you've changed your tone of voice a little bit, or you've changed slides. So something should be happening about every minute or two. Then every 4 minutes or so, you should be asking people to do something. Put that in the chat, or use the whiteboard feature, or take this poll, or give me a green check, or give me a smiley face. You should be asking people to use the interaction tools within your tool itself. So be that Zoom or WebEx or whatever it is that you're using, right? And then about every 5 to 10 minutes, there should be a big activity. There should be a mini activity, if you will, a breakout room or a discussion or something off of Kahoot, maybe you're going to do a pop quiz. So there should be something bigger that happens. And so now now you can see there's a rhythm, right? Every minute there's something happening on the screen. Every 4 minutes, you're asking people to do something. Every 5 minutes, there's a mini activity that's happening on the screen. So now you can see that there's this cadence that's keeping people with you. And that's what you want to do. So that's, when we're talking about activities or interaction, that's what we mean. So here's your question, Matt.
Yeah, so we're going to try something. I'm going to try muting you and see if that works. And I think it does. So I'm just going to be quick on the mute here. So a couple things I want to recap, because I think you said, wow, there's so much good stuff there. First of all, I love the idea of being, and I'm doing it now, be bigger on screen, right? Just bring the bigger energy, and things are it's going to convey, because, we used to say all the time, the camera adds 10 pounds. I did that to myself. I think it's that the camera doesn't convey the same energy as you can when you're in a room, right? Like if you've been a trainer, you've been in a room and you're good at it, you know how to kind of work with people and talk to them, and you can fill that space with your voice and whatever. On camera, it's different because you're not projecting the same way. And in fact, I'd say there's times, and this is showmanship rather than maybe, but we get a little bit closer to the microphone and make it a little, hey, wait a second. This is really important. And it's like understanding the dynamics of the room. So I love that. And then the idea of like finding these interactions and the constant change. Oh my gosh. And here we are, of course, doing a podcast that lasts 45 minutes, 50 minutes. And hopefully we're doing that by questions and using questions. But I love this idea. And it makes me think of, and I think we just mentioned this person recently. I'm blanking on the name. The book is Brain Rules.
Oh, John Medina.
John Medina. Yeah, absolutely. And his book is fantastic. And he talks about something very similar in lecture, like every 10 minutes, he would do stuff that would kind of re-engage and re-energize and reinvigorate kind of the learning process. So I all that to say, that's a really long recap of the brilliant things you just said. In just a second, Shannon, we're going to answer some questions from the audience. But before we do that, I want to take a quick break because I want to talk about something that's really important to me and to the rest of TechSmith is TechSmith Academy. TechSmith Academy is a free online learning platform where you can go learn about script writing, storyboarding, creating video, writing helpful help, job aids, and more. And maybe if I'm not going to get too much trouble for this, I'm going to drop that. We've got a new course coming, we'll say so we won't give a time frame, but it's coming soon, and it's got a great author, and she is putting together some fantastic content on micro learning. Just so you know, and she might happen to be on the show today. So check out the TechSmith Academy, free online learning platform. We're excited for her future course coming out. With that said, though, of course, let's dive into a couple questions, and we'll go into more some thoughts about ILT and converting it to VLT. So we got one question here. Ryan, who is watching from LinkedIn, asks, what will training look like post-pandemic? Not exactly an ILT to VLT question, but I think it's one that I think probably involves those topics, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. Here's my thought. And again, it's just my thought, so take it for what it's worth. I believe what's going to happen is businesses are going to realize, and hopefully good L&D professionals will realize, that you can do virtual training well, and it can be effective. It's also a part of a blended learning solution. So my hope is that we move more towards blended solutions. So whether that's anchored in an ILT or anchored in a virtual space, but we should be using more of the tools that are out there to really encourage learning reinforcement, encourage discussions, ongoing discussions, encourage drip feeding of knowledge, making use of all of the learning technologies that we have that will reinforce learning, yet not cause disruption to the business. And that's what I think businesses will see post-pandemic, is that there are many more ways for us to get really good exchange of knowledge out there without dragging people into a classroom. And I know a lot of face-to-face trainers probably don't necessarily want to hear that, because we've really wrapped ourselves up in this very comfortable, face-to-face training blanket. But there are really so many more exciting opportunities out there.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I'll just point out is there's lots of great blended opportunities with video, with images, that you can bring those things together. Next question, and let me see if I can actually pull this one out onto the screen. Oops, we're gonna get the right one. How do you consider the difference in training duration when converting from ILT to VLT? Great question, because you might have a course, or an instructor-led thing that's planned for a day, it's planned for 5 days. Yeah. And no one wants to sit on Zoom for 5 days, 8-hour, 5 8-hour days, right?
Right. No, and please don't do that. And the scary thing is that when the pandemic started, that's what people were doing. They were saying, okay, I've got an 8-hour class, now we'll put it on an 8-hour Zoom. And that just blew my mind. I was like, no, don't do that to people. And so I still tell you, I beg you, please don't do that to people. Okay, so now what are the guidelines? Now, if you have to do a longer VILT program, you have to make sure that your breaks are more frequent and that they are longer, okay? Because again, people are staring at this computer screen, okay, right here. And so you've got a variety of different things that are happening to you. First, you've got eye strain, you've got brain strain, you've got cognitive overload that's happening. You have all of these things, not to mention you have many people who are taking these training classes at home. And so this means that they may have children that they have to attend to. They may have other work things that they have to attend to. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the environment that we have to take into consideration. So if you are doing longer training during the course of a day, then your breaks have to be more frequent and they have to be longer. That said, the common refrain is to keep your virtual training at 90 minutes. I'm okay with 2 hours, even 2.5 if you have a good long break in the middle of it. But I would recommend that you cap it there. And what you do is that you just make the training over the course of more days. So maybe it's 2 hours on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, rather than 6 hours taking up everybody's Monday and also putting them into brain strain, right? Where we're giving them, technology agony. So let's not do that to people. So that's my recommendation. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, one thing I'm curious, Shannon, about your opinion on is what about delivering information outside of the virtual environment? Like maybe you send them a couple of videos or some things to read, and they do it on their own and then come together. Does that have a place here as well, do you think?
Absolutely. So that's part of the blend that I was referring to earlier. And when I'm hosting my own workshops, here's the cadence that I like to use, is that I usually have my classroom set up in Zoom, and I use that in conjunction with Slack. So we have, you have your pre-work, your discussions, your projects, your networking all happens in Slack, and then your main content, your main gist of your content happens in the virtual space, happens in the Zoom space. But what I'm doing is I'm producing smaller, shorter videos, so maybe little 3 or 5 minute videos, which also bring home a particular point that I want to make. So let's say if this were a virtual training class. So I do a workshop for clients on how to conduct virtual training. And so one topic might be how to use collaboration tools. So I may have an hour in a virtual setting like this where we may practice with collaboration tools, but then I'm going to post a little 5-minute video afterwards to wrap up all of the topics, to wrap up the main ideas and to give people an opportunity to process, think, and comment. And so now what we've done is we've really made the learning more connected. It's just not me talking to you, it's you having a chance to reflect. And that really is important when you're thinking about the virtual space, is having those opportunities to have that place to share information, right? And I think that's what makes learning stronger.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to do one more question and we'll get back kind of into our formal conversation. This one comes from Steven, and he's asking, do you advise classroom limits for VLT to ensure engagement interactivity? Also for the larger numbers, do you request all have their video on? Great question. I know what it's like at home. You've got a messy backdrop. You're not set up. You're like, oh gosh, I don't want to show my kids run around doing whatever. So that's a great question about the camera stuff, but also about limits. What do you think, Shannon?
Right. That's an interesting question. I do not require that people have their video on, and that's for a variety of reasons. Like right now, this very big shot of me, I don't like that because my camera is actually set up to be right here in this square, so you don't see this green screen that's happening over here. But for that reason is why some people don't put on their video, because you don't know what's happening in their lives, right? They may be in their closet for all trying to get some space and buffer some noise. So I never require people to have on their video for that one reason, but also because it sucks up bandwidth. Some people just may not have the internet capability to do that. Now, as far as caps with the class, I've done some virtual classes, which is with as many as 35 people, and that is actual training classes. I don't like it because I can't really use the collaborative tools that I like to use. If you're putting in, mural and you're having 30 people on a mural board, it's very hectic. So I like to keep them smaller. I like to keep them in the neighborhood of 20. Anything larger than that, once you start getting into the hundreds, you're really talking webinar. Then you're just talking, I'm just talking to you and maybe taking some comments in the chat. But that's usually my take on that. I like to keep them 30 and under. Anything over that, you're really looking at a webinar, or break the class up, do 2 parts, one in the morning, one in the afternoon.
Makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so we've answered a few questions. We'll try to get to a few more before we end up. Shannon, one of the things I'm curious about, because we've talked some theoretical, a lot of great advice here. Like anyone watching or listening so far, I think is well positioned to go out and start making this process. But I want to get a little bit more kind of refined here in terms of the actual process that you use, because we've talked about kind of limits and these kind of boundary type questions. But I'm wondering if you can, so let's say I've got a class and we can use an example, we can make up an example, whatever works best for you to help us to understand. I was thinking about my sister-in-law has found herself in a training role at a credit union, right? And they did everything face-to-face, and now they're like, we need to do stuff more virtual because of everything that's happening. And, the thing I was thinking about is, where would you advise someone to start? And I'm sure it's all very dependent on, it depends, because that's a lot of the answers that people have, right? It's like, well, it depends on what the course is. But let's say they were just, I was thinking of something like customer service skills, right? Something that's it's not necessarily software, which I think would translate really well to virtual, obviously. But you got customer service skills. So where would you even start to advise, kind of generally that process you would go through if you've got a virtual environment, or you're going to a virtual environment?
Right. Now, let's say you do have training that's already been created, and it's been created for customer service. Now, what you want to do is you're going to reverse engineer this training. So you've got your curriculum, and you start thinking about your learning objectives. And now you have to think about, do my learning objectives fit within the virtual space? So for example, if you've said that one of your learning objectives is, by the end of this program, the participants will be able to de-escalate conversations with customers, Okay, so now you have to think about, if I said that the participants are going to be able to de-escalate conversations, we have to create an activity that allows for the participants to de-escalate conversations. That's where you start. So now what does that look like? Is that a role play? Is that a case study review? Is it a video review? What does that look like? And so you think about the activity that you might have done in your real life class, and then think about how can I convert that into the virtual space? And is it possible to convert that into the virtual space? In some cases, you may have to rewrite your learning objectives, where you think, well, I really can't have them demonstrating something for whatever reason. I will not be able to have them demonstrating something. So now I have to change what that learning outcome is supposed to be, or what that learning objective is going to be. So that's where you start. You start first with your learning objectives, and then you take the action statement, because you guys are writing good 3-part learning objectives. So you're taking your action statement out of your learning objective, and then you're saying, what do I do in the live class to make that learning objective be successful? Now, what activity am I going to use in the virtual space? What tools am I going to use? What am I going to have them do? And so you map that out first, and then that's when you start thinking about, what am I going to say? Because you've got to get the exercises and the activities in first, and then your words second, right? And then that's why you might even have to recreate your participant guides to fit within the virtual space. So it's reverse engineering what you already have for your instructor-led training.
Makes a lot of sense. And so one of the things I'm hearing, and you correct me if I'm wrong. So first of all, I'm the non-optimist in me, the realist is saying, there's work here, Shannon. Sounds like there's work. I thought this was going to be easy, and but what I'm understanding is, like, it's probably you're at least 50% of the way there. It's just reconfiguring to work to make it actually work in the environment. Because I think from everything you said earlier, my fear is that someone's just going to try to do that same intent of like activity, and it's just not going to work. So I do appreciate that. Like, yeah, rewriting learning objectives is not fun, but
nope.
It's going to allow you to achieve the actual goals that you need to achieve, because that's what we need. It's it's not about It's not about just the learning. It's about actually getting them to do something or understand or perform in a certain way. So I can appreciate that. Okay, so we've looked at our material. We started to say, like, yep, I'm going to rewrite my learning objectives. I'm going to kind of reconfigure my activities. And you said something really key there. That was your voice second. Of course, there's always information to deliver. Like, we can't get away from it, right? You can't just have someone know how to do something. You have to coach them and get them experience. Right. So then is the next step to, like, as you're doing these and reconfiguring, do you look at tools? Do you look at, like, how delivery mechanisms? Do you look at, like, you said maybe your participant guide got to get changed. I'm guessing your instructor guide's going to get updated or audited to make it better, right?
Yep, exactly, because timing becomes really critical. And I saw one of the questions here in the chat, which was from Charmaine, is how do you turn a very heavy activity day into a virtual session? And this is it, is that you have to go back through your facilitator guide and through your facilitator notes and rethink about how the day is structured. You may even have to go back and rethink about how you are presenting the content. So it might be that the foundational information that you may spend the first couple of hours doing in a live classroom setting, or the first hour doing in a live classroom setting, that might have to be done in a video. So you shoot a video of yourself talking about these foundational ideas or theories or mental models or whatever it is you're talking about. You put that video together, and you do it very clever, and you can do it in Camtasia or whatever, and you send it out to people via email or your Teams or Slack or what have you. People watch it, and then they come prepared to do the activities that you would have normally done in the classroom. And that's how you start to build this up. And it's important then that when you're looking at your facilitator's guide, because your facilitator guide, a good one, would say, this activity takes 30 minutes with 15 minutes for debrief. Okay, well, maybe you've got that kind of time in the virtual space, maybe you don't. So now you have to reconfigure this. If I put people in breakout rooms, maybe the activity becomes faster. And a lot of times people are surprised that happens. Activities that would have taken an hour in the live classroom actually now take a half an hour when you're doing it in the virtual space because you don't have to herd chickens, right? So here you're putting people in breakout rooms, you're telling them what to do, they're doing their thing. You know, in the live space, what happens is you put people into groups and they're talking and they're laughing. And by the time you get them into the group and you get the instructions redone, then an hour has gone by. So this is where you really have to start thinking about, you know, how should I structure this? And so again, you're reverse engineering what you're doing. And that's how you get those heavy days, you know, done in your heavy activities completed in your virtual space. Is you may have to break them apart and use different tools. You may have to do some of them offline and then do some of the heavy lifting while you're in the virtual space.
Yeah, that makes a complete and total sense. And I love this idea that you said that, like, we're not spending the same time, right? Because how much time in face-to-face is chit chat, it's coming back together, it's moving chairs, moving desk, doing all this stuff. So I love that, you know, just by the nature of the medium, we're gonna save time. So I think that's great. And
right. I think an important point here, Matt, is a lot of people think they'll go, well, going virtual means that we're going to decrease class time. I don't see it necessarily as a decreasing of class time. I see it as being more effective in your class time, more productive in your class time. So if you plan this well, then it all comes together that way.
Yeah, it feels a lot more optimized, right? That we're taking advantage of not having to do certain aspects, but you still, of course, want people to chit chat. You still want them to connect.
Oh, sure.
And that's you know, because that's a vital part of bringing any group together, is making those connections. One of the things as you've been talking, that it hit me, and it wasn't a question I wrote down earlier, but it's got me thinking. Like, we've talked about, like, you know, some of these activities. I'm curious, are there any things that you've seen as you've worked on moving these instructor-led courses to virtual, or you've watched others do that? Are there any activities or things that just you would think would work, but just don't work in the virtual environment?
You know, I don't know. I had my doubts at first, you know, when everything started. And I've been doing virtual training now for many, many moons. And I've made my adaptations as I've gone along. But now, ever since the pandemic, is I started doing deeper thinking about this. And I've always said it, but now I really realize it, is that there's really not a whole lot that you cannot do in the virtual space if you have the right tools. And it's all about, you know, reimagining how some of the tools are used. For example, I was thinking to myself, well, one of the activities that I like to do in a face-to-face class is the gallery walk. And I'm sure any of you who are live facilitators who are listening right now are familiar with the gallery walk. You hang the flip charts on the wall and people walk around and they give their comments or whatever, you know, as they're walking through. Okay, so how do we replicate that in the virtual space? Because that's always a fun activity. People like doing that. So how do we do that? And it took some playing around with the different tools and bringing in, you know, some extra thought spaces. And I was like, you know what, if I combine breakout rooms with Google Docs, I can make this happen. So then it's really about understanding all the tools that we really have that we don't make use of. So you think about Google Docs or Google Slides or Jamboard, you know, all of those are easily used if you put them in breakout rooms. So all I have to do is put the different links into the different breakout rooms and people can see each other's work and they can comment on each other's work while being in a group. So I was like, oh my God. So I had that aha moment. So I don't know if there's anything that can work or shouldn't work. You know, it's just about knowing the tools, playing with them, and, you know, being unafraid to experiment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fantastic that, you know, this idea of look at the tools and how they can be used in different ways, because we're in a different environment. It's a different world. And I think that makes perfect sense. And I hope everyone listening out there is excited by that as I am. You might be also a little bit like, oh my gosh, I'm not that creative. That's why we do these videos. That's why Shannon's out there doing her, you guys you're doing your webinars and you're doing your meetups and things like coffee chats and things like that. And so I hope everyone's inspired by that. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I want to make sure we get to a couple more questions because there's a few more in here that I think are worth talking about it. So Shannon, David asks, how do you deal with the time requirement versus accomplishing the goal style of teaching? And I think we talked a little bit about that, right? Like you got to change expectations. But my guess is, and David, correct us if we're wrong here, is that there seems to be some expectations at various levels. Maybe it's coming from management. Maybe it's just internal pressure, the way it's always been done, that, oh, we need to spend this much time kind of butts in the seat to get things done. I guess, what would you say to David? And I'll put his question back up here so you can see it again.
Thank you. I'm not sure. I kind of took the question differently.
Okay,
so
sure.
Maybe David, you could add some clarification in the chat. When I read this question, I thought maybe somebody is saying we only are going to give you an hour and a half, even though this class was scheduled for 4 hours. Now you only get an hour and a half, which happens. And so let me know, David, in the chat here, if I have interpreted your question correctly, because I want to be sure that I'm answering the right question. But I'm going to go ahead and deal with that first. Is my conversation with leadership at this point, and you have to be unafraid to have a conversation with leadership, is to say, these are the learning outcomes that are expected. You are expecting people to be able to do X, Y, Z based on this training. Okay. This training was originally set for 4 hours and it was successful at 4 hours. So now if I move it to an hour and a half, and if this training is not successful, what's the consequence? Right. Okay, so there's that. So I'm typically unafraid to ask people that question. What happens if this training fails? And I usually get some sort of a smart answer back where they say, well, you're fired if this training fails. Well, okay, I'm fired, but the training still failed. So now what? So we have to be prepared to have those sorts of mental conversations. Now, David, I see your comment in the chat that there are requirements for specific time in seats. So now it's like we have to put people in the seat for 3 hours because that is the regulation. The regulation says that sexual harassment has to take 3 hours. Okay. All right. So now it's about being clever. Is it a butts in seats requirement? Or is it a knowledge exchange requirement? So 3 hours equals that they have learned this. So that means you can put content together and you can put it in different places, like I said, in Slack or your collaborative space, and they learned all these things and that equates to 3 hours. Now, if it's an actual, they've got to be on this camera for 3 hours, then you just have to be clever. So take apart the class, take apart the curriculum, build in those activities, have them actually doing something, but have them doing something that relates to the learning. So now you put on your creativity hat and you think about, all right, as it sits, I only have maybe about an hour and a half of good content. So now what sort of activities can I do? Can I do some case studies? Can I do some use cases? Can I put them in breakout rooms and have them create their own job aids? Can I do a panel discussion? Can I do a debate? So there's a whole lot of different things that you can do to really build good quality information in the time that you have.
Yeah, I think, and I see David had another comment. It says arbitrary even when students master material while others require extra time. So I guess my thought, Shannon, here is that we want to be respectful of the learner's time, even if there's a requirement, right? Government says you have to do this, then we've got to do that. But can we make that the best use of that time to help them? And when I worked at a pharmaceutical and manufacturing, you did have learners of all variety, right? You had the people that were the chemical engineers to the people that were not, they came right out of high school and they were working this job and they weren't, trained in that same kind of formal education. And so I could see where that could be a challenge in that environment when you're trying to train across many, many, many levels of understanding and depth of knowledge and background and things like that. But it does seem like I love your, make that time worthwhile with the activities.
Right.
I love the ideas of having them make their own job aids. What are you going to forget? What are you not going to remember?
I love that. That's one of my most favorite activities is I start out saying, you're going to make your own job aid. And then we take little breaks throughout to say, okay, add something to your job aid. And then you put them in a breakout room and then everybody looks at everybody else's job aid, right? And then you can make improvements based on that. I also like the idea of turning it into a panel. So if you've got highly experienced people in your group, talk to them before the class and say, I'd kind of like to get your opinion on this.
Yeah.
Why not? People love to share what they know, especially if you're dealing with a group of subject matter experts. So let them share.
For sure. A couple other comments here as we're starting to get to wrapping up. Deborah said learning management system, the LMS, will probably be used more and more, which I think is
probably. But I would want it. But I'd also tell you, just because you can put it in your learning management system doesn't mean you should put it in your learning management system. Some learning management systems are just horrible, so they're not easy to navigate. The user interface is really clunky. So unless you have to put it in your learning management system, I would encourage you to think about other tools.
Yeah. I mean, use what's available to you and make the best of it. Do what you can. An LMS, a well-run LMS can be a benefit. Of course, we all know some of the horror stories when they're not well run. A few last questions here. Fred asks, he said, sorry about that. With COVID-19, would Shannon say helping others learn to convert convert lead training to convert business owners to live training? I'm not sure that makes sense, Fred.
Right. Helping others learn to convert instructor-led training, I assume, to convert business owners to live.
Well, we'll see if Fred can clarify that for us here in a second.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand that question, but yes, it sounds like that deserves an answer that says yes. We should be helping business owners understand that, or stakeholders understand that there are a variety of different media, a variety of different methods for which training can be delivered, and we should take advantage of those.
For sure. So one other question here, and then I think we'll wrap things up with a last question. This is Ken, but Ken goes by Software Maniac. In live workshops, attendees are grouped to perform exercises. This encourages in-group discussion. Difficult with Zoom. Have you come up with a creative way to pull that off? And Ken also mentioned, Shannon, that he just purchased your book. So thank you, Ken, for supporting one of our guests.
No, that's nice of you. Thank you very much. I have not found it difficult in Zoom to pull off breakout rooms. What I really like about the Zoom feature, the breakout rooms in Zoom, is that you can just put them in there. I don't have to, in some programs, you have to plan that ahead of time. But in this case, I can just random throw people into a room. And as long as you give good instruction, that's the key. And that's something we really haven't talked about, is with these tools, you always have to have a slide that gives people the directions. So this is what I'm expecting of you. You're going to click here, and when the box pops up, click accept, and then you're going to go into the room. And when you go into the room, you're going to be automatically muted. So don't forget to unmute yourself. So you just have to be very, very specific with the instructions, for all of the activities that you're going to do. Never assume that people know what you expect of them. And one quick note on that is that even goes for chats. So when I'm in a space like this and I'm doing a virtual training, I'm on repeat. It's like, okay, in the chat, answer this question for me. In the chat, I'd like to hear your opinion. In the chat, I would like you to post your ideas. So I'm always giving them direction as far as what I expect them to do. So therefore, there's no question, there's no ambiguity here. And people know, people will do what's expected of them. So you just have to tell them what's expected.
Yeah, a little slow on the button clicking here today. I think that makes perfect sense. And I do think, we're in even though we expect people to understand Zoom by this point, 9-10 months into a lot of it being virtual, we can't. And I see that all the time as a problem with even, how many times a day are you in meetings, you say you're muted, or how many times have I muted myself and not unmuted it when I should have, it's just reminding people, even if they know. Yep. The other thing I'll note of that, Shannon, I think is really important, why that advice is really important, is how many times you've gotten to Zoom and something moved, or any tool.
Right.
And it's like, oh, they updated it, which is cool. And TechSmith is guilty of this, you guys, we know, but it's just getting that consistency. Sometimes things aren't consistent because it changes from time to time. So,
right.
Well, Shannon, as we wrap up here, go ahead.
Fred, yes, you can post a link to my website. That's fine. Also, Fred, webcam, Logitech 920. Then lastly, I just want to get this out just real quick if I can. When we're talking about engagement, I just want to make one more fine point here. Is one of the major questions that I get asked as far as issues are concerned, people tell me, I can't get people to answer questions. I get nothing but silence. And that is because you have not set the expectation up front. So have them start using the chat at the very beginning. So you put an icebreaker question up or something along those lines. As soon as people start coming into the meeting room, in the chat, tell me what your favorite Thanksgiving side dish is. In the chat, tell me your favorite football team. In the chat, did you watch Game of Thrones? Okay, so now you're getting them used to using the chat. Now, here's the key. When you ask people a question, you have to give it more time, because when you're in the classroom, you say, anyone have a question? You're looking immediately for people to raise their hand, and you're looking at the expression on their faces, right? That tells you a lot. But in this case, you don't have that. So you have to wait a couple of extra beats, because you've asked them a question. Now they have to think about the answer. Then they have to type the answer. And not everyone is so quick on the keyboard. So if you don't allow that time, if you say, well, do you have any questions? And then you give it just a couple of beats and you go, well, I see nobody's saying anything in the chat, so I'm going to move on. That automatically discourages questions for the remainder of your time. So I just wanted to make that point before we left.
I think that's a great place to end. What a great ending point. And we just asked the question in the Q&A area, what's everyone's takeaway for the session? And we'll give it a couple seconds so those can roll in. And as we're waiting for those to come in, Shannon, first of all, sorry everyone for the technical problems so far today. I think we got it figured out. And there's something going on. We'll get it technically fixed somehow, I think. But Shannon, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insight. I hope, for anyone, I guess, we've had a couple of people ask about, someone about your book. We got asked about your website. Where can people find you and find more information about these topics? Because I know you're doing stuff all the time that would continue the conversation and be in addition to the conversation.
Sure. You can find me at learningrebels.com. I encourage everyone to sign up for the newsletter, not just because it's my newsletter, but because every other Friday we do a live chat. So it's me and the Learning Rebels Network. And if you are on the newsletter, you get those announcements. So if you are interested in having more one-on-one conversations, and these are not hosted conversations like what we're doing here, these are let's everybody jump in and talk type of conversations and share knowledge. And that happens every other Friday. So I encourage you to go to my website, learningrebels.com, and sign up for the newsletter so you are in the know.
Perfect. And any place, I suppose you're on social media
Twitter,
and things.
Oh yeah, I'm all over the socials. So you can find me Learning Rebels, Instagram, Learning Rebels, Facebook, at S Tipton on Twitter and Shannon Tipton on LinkedIn. You can find me anywhere. I like to say, if you cannot find me, then the zombie apocalypse has finally hit.
Well, let's hope that's not true. Shannon, thank you once again for all your wisdom and insight. So everybody go check out Shannon's website, sign up for a newsletter, and let us know what you think of today's episodes. We're going to wrap up here just in a second with what's new at TechSmith. But Shannon, thank you so much again. It's always great to see you and talk with you.
Oh, same to you, Matt.
Thank you. All right, everybody, we're going to wrap things up kind of quickly here because we've gone a little bit long, but that's okay because the information was so good. So let's jump into what's new at TechSmith. All right, I think we're unmuted, so we're good to go. Okay, let's go into this. We've got what's new on the blog, right? Like you guys, if you haven't seen our blog, holy cow, it is a source of wealth and information that rivals almost no other because it is amazing. We've got people putting out new content all the time. It's also a great repository. So if you missed one of these episodes, like you came late to Shannon's, you want to see it, but you don't got time to go out and find it on YouTube, which you can do, of course. You can go to the blog and it will be up there in a week or so, but you can go back and find past episodes as well. So let's just jump over here. We got a couple blog posts that are new. If you missed it, we had Felice Banner on the 19th of November. And she talked about growing skills and identifying learning needs. Felice is awesome. If you don't know Felice, she put together a whole matrix of how you go about learning. Like, how do you identify your growth that you can make in that process of learning? I found it super helpful. I've already used it and it's been awesome. We also got a great one that if you missed this episode, because a lot of our blog posts are coming from the podcast, if you didn't know, is about writing scripts. Would you believe that one of our most viewed videos in the TechSmith Academy is about writing scripts? It's because it's difficult. It's not easy. And we had Justin Simon and Andy Owen, both TechSmithies, talk about their process about writing scripts and things and ideas that you can use to help you get better at that process. One last thing here, and I'll click into it so you can see this full article. This is 5 asynchronous communication examples for better remote work. A lot of us are working from home nowadays. That's the way life goes. It's going to continue that way probably for a while for a lot of us, but you can look at, we got some ideas on how you can make your remote work a little bit better, a little bit more straightforward if you're looking for some ideas and some inspiration. With that said, we hope that you're surviving out there doing your things. We hope that you're finding this content useful and other content that we make for TechSmith, of course. If you haven't checked out the podcast, go subscribe. You can get that weekly feed right into your ears when you're doing your chores, you're mopping your kitchen floor, whatever you're doing, you can listen to the podcast or you can watch the videos on replay on YouTube, of course. And if that's not enough, check out the blog. And we'd love to have any of your reviews or feedback with any of it because we want to know how we can continue to get better. And we hope that whatever you're doing, whether you're making videos, making images, that you spend a little bit of time just leveling up your skills and getting better every single day. With that said, everyone, we hope you have a great week and we will see you next time.